Bible? Once you've got a Bible, you can open up to 1 Samuel chapter 14. We will continue our study after a brief break last Sunday for a Mother's Day message. The Sunday before that, and then we were in 1 Samuel. But anyways, we're finishing up chapter 14 today. And 1 Samuel chapter 14 is one of many historical narratives in the Bible. Okay, so there are different types of writings in the Bible. There is, you can go to the Psalms and we would be reading poetry there. There are different accounts. There's prophecy, different types of writing. This is a historical narrative. In other words, it's being narrated to us, and it's history. It's the history of God and what He was doing with His people at the time. And really, the main goal of all of this is to get us to Jesus. But the place that we're at is a historical narrative. Now, whenever you have a narrative, you are going to have some characters and in the story, and we certainly have some characters here, primarily the prophet Samuel, named, the book is named for him, 1 Samuel. And then we've got Saul, King Saul. We will have David later on. And we've been introduced to Jonathan also, who is Saul's son. And we've learned some really neat things about Jonathan. He seems to be a godly individual, godly young man. And the last time that we were in chapter 14, we found out that he had some pretty good leadership skills also. And that was because and based on primarily the fact that he was not trying to serve himself. Now, oddly enough, we will turn our attention to the second half of the chapter, and we will start with verses 24 there. And what I've titled this is Failing Leadership. The first half, which was based on Jonathan, I titled Faithful Leadership. And we learned some great lessons again about leadership. Well, today we will be looking at failing leadership, and I was specific in calling it failing leadership and not failed leadership, because what we are looking at in this portion is the process of Saul failing at his leadership position. And he is on his way to becoming a bad leader. He was an okay leader up to this point. He started out well. But things have not continued, or they will not be continuing in that vein as we get here to these verses. And so there's failing leadership. Now, what we're going to see here in verse 24, and please, I forgot to change the verse references underneath there where it says 6 to 12a. Never mind all that. Verse 24. Verse 24 is forced allegiance, if you're a note taker. Forced allegiance. So the story that we are jumping midway into is that the Philistines and the Israelites have been warring with one another. In this particular battle, Jonathan got up, took his assistant, and in a test of faith, went out and followed God's lead, it turns out, and was beginning to defeat the Philistines. And then all of Israel ended up joining in, and they also began to fight the Philistines. Now, right in the middle of that, here is what happens, verse 24. And the men of Israel, which would be the soldiers of Israel, were distressed that day. They were stressed out. Why? For Saul had placed the people under oath. Saul had placed the people under oath. And this is what he said in that oath: "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. There in verse 24 is the forced allegiance. This is not right for Saul to do this here in verse 24. Again, you'll note in the second line there, Saul had placed the people under oath. So there was no choice of the people as to whether they wanted to follow this oath or not. I mean, I guess in the end they did have a choice. They could have disobeyed. But what Saul is saying here is that if the people eat something before he says, then essentially the people are going to die for that. They're going to suffer for that. So the oath, you will notice, is cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. There is we'll come back to that fear part. Let me show you something. Here's what Jesus said. Jesus said, but Jesus called himself to him and said, he's talking to his disciples, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles, in other words, the rulers, the ungodly rulers, that they lord it over them. Lord what over them? The fact that they are rulers, their leadership. They lord it over them, there in verse 25. And those who are great exercise authority over them. That's what we are seeing from Saul here. He is lording his leadership over the people that follow him. He's exercising his authority over them. Now, Jesus went on to say, and you won't see the rest of it here, but let me read it for you. Jesus said, yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to be great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, and he used that term that we hate so much, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Jesus there was pointing out that true leadership, good leadership, doesn't force people, but leads them by service, self-sacrifice, and service. That is what the Bible always puts forth as good leadership practice. That is service. Now, what we're seeing from Saul here, and let's go back here, is that in verse 24, note the language in verse 24, cursed is the man who eats any food until evening before, there's two key words, I have taken vengeance on my enemies. You will note that there is no concern, at least seemingly there's no concern for what God wants to do or for the people. The Philistines have become Saul's enemies. His vision is only as far as himself. He cannot see any further than the tip of his own nose. In other words, he's only concerned with what he wants. This is what Saul wants. Cursed is anyone who eats until I have taken vengeance on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. Now, because they were forced into that allegiance, and just so I mentioned it, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer, but leadership or following a leader shouldn't be forced. You should have the choice to do that. If a leader is forcing you to do things or to give your allegiance to them, not a good leader. That's one of the indicators there. But note as we move on into verse 25 and our story continues, now all the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. And when the people had come into the woods, there was the honey, dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. Now, that is thus the reason why I have... here's what we're going to find. Those of you that are note takers and trying to figure this out as we go through. Failing leadership is the main division. Failing leadership. The subpoint is forced allegiance. Now, what we will have from this point on is subpoints to our subpoint. And what these are is these are negative results of Saul's forced allegiance, the fact that the people were forced. Because they were forced, the first thing that we're seeing there is that they were operating in fear. Now, they come to this honey, they find honey on the ground. Verse 26, and when the people had come into the woods, there was the honey dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. Now, we must, in order to get the most effect from this, to help us fully understand this passage, we must always try to insert ourselves into that passage. What would it be like if I were there? And so we must understand what these people are going through. They are fighting the Philistines. Okay? Now, I have never been in battle. It's one of my great regrets is having not gone into the military. I wish that I would have, but I didn't. Thus, I have never been in battle, which I suppose I should be thankful for. Accounts that I've heard of war is, it's horrific. But I've never been in that sort of circumstance. So I can't fully understand what it is that they're experiencing. But we must understand that they are in the midst of battle. And along with that, we would assume that there would be stress and fear already. I'm fighting. My life could end at any moment. So there's stress and there's fear already. However, there is the added fear here in verse 26 when it says that no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. So there's a distinction there. It's not that they feared the battle, although I'm sure they did fear the battle and the fighting with the Philistines. But now, added to that is the fear of the oath. And we can understand, we're all smart enough to understand, they're not afraid of the oath itself, but in what happens if they break the oath, if they're disobedient to their king, to Saul. They know that their life could end. So we might ask the question right away, is this good leadership? Good leadership, if you're following a good leader, then you should not be operating in fear of that leader. Now, there should be a healthy respect, a healthy fear, a good respect, but you ought not be living in fear of that leader that you are following. And that is exactly what's happening here in verse 26. The people feared the oath, or they feared Saul because of the oath. Now, verse 27 says, but Jonathan had not heard his father's charge. He had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. If you were here for the first part of the story, you know that Jonathan and his assistant left to go fight the Philistines. And his dad didn't know. No one knew. He said, let's just you and I go. And we'll go see what God's going to do. So he didn't hear his father's oath or the charge. Therefore, in verse 27, he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand and dipped it in a honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened. What this means is that he came to that forest where everybody was at. He saw the honey and the honeycomb, and whatever stick he had, he dipped that in the honey, pulled it out, and ate the honey. Now, when he ate the honey, it says that his countenance brightened. In other words, he had been fighting all day long, the stress and the strain of that, the physical toll, on the body. And now, finally, he takes a little break in the forest, gets some honey, and eats it, and his countenance brightened. In other words, you guys would also call it his aura. His aura brightened. Well, he ate some honey, and his attitude brightened up. It's like, man, that felt so good. It was like an energy drink, like, long, hard day, and you're like, man, I'm dragging, and you get an energy drink or some coffee, and all of a sudden, shing, I'm ready to go. I've got 5-6 more hours in me. You're ready to roll on. Well, that's what happened here with Jonathan. Now, what happens next is, verses 28 through 30, we see this. Then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. And here's the next negative outcome or effect of his failing leadership and his forced allegiance. Not only are the people living in fear, operating in fear, but now they are also experiencing weakness. That's what it means there in verse 28. And the people were faint. The people were faint. In other words, the people were ready to pass out because they were so tired from fighting all day. It's strenuous. They're exerting themselves. The strain, the distress, the fear, all of it, these people are ready to call it quits. But Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. Look now, how my countenance has brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies which they found. For now would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines. So he points out that the people could have experienced an even greater victory had they been able or allowed to eat something. But because of his father's foolish oath that he forced on the people, they're now not only experiencing fear but also weakness. It could have been so much better. Most of you, maybe all of you, know that I'm a dad, and my kids are a little bit older now. When they were pretty young, I did not realize, this is going to sound so crazy, but just wait till you have kids. I used to take my kids out to go Christmas shopping every year, go Christmas shopping for their mom or for one another. And what I discovered, and this is going to sound like a no-brainer, I'm telling you, but you just wait till you're a parent. You just wait. And if we still are in contact, I'm going to remind you. I realized that as an adult, as a guy, I was like, let's go shop. Like, let's just get it done, man. Boom, you get out there, you start doing it. And get as much done as you can. And then, you know what, afterward, there's time to be hungry. Okay? I'll stop at Hot Dog on a Stick or something in the mall, get me a corn dog or a cheese dog or something, and I'll grab something later on. Well, I was thinking about myself. I wasn't thinking about my kids. Now, I had my kids with me, but I wasn't thinking about them being young and being hungry. And so I'm like, man, let's move, let's go. I'm trying to get through these stores and get some shopping done. And my kids were starting to get whiny. They're starting to whine and complain about things. Like, what in the world is these, what's wrong with them? Like, let's go. And I'm like, I'm hardcore, man. I'm like, let's go. Come on, we don't have time for all that whining. You better get up. I'm going to give you a reason to whine. Let's go. And it didn't take very long, obviously, for me to realize, oh my gosh, real simple fix. They're hungry. They need food. They need something to drink. And once I figured that out, bam, now I'm on the move. Now the next time from that point on, when I take them out, I make sure that we stop to eat lunch, or we might even start before. Hey, let's start with burgers. Now, once they got some food in them, they got some soda, get them sugared up, where everybody's ready to go now, man. Now we're cooking with Crisco. But I didn't understand that as a young dad early in those days. Figured that out later. Saul hasn't figured that out. We're not talking about shopping at Macy's. We're talking about being in battle. And he's telling his troops, no one's allowed to eat until I accomplish what I want to accomplish. Now, I put a verse up on the screen earlier from Matthew chapter 20. This is servant leadership that Saul is displaying. The problem is it's self-servant leadership. It's not others-centered. It's not serving the Lord. You remember his original wording, until I have taken vengeance on my enemies. The problem here with Saul, in the beginning of his downfall here, the beginning of his failing leadership, which will eventually result in failed leadership, is that he is focused on himself. And it's self-serving leadership. And it's not self-sacrificial leadership, it's others sacrificed or sacrificial leadership. He's willing to sacrifice everybody else in order to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. And thus his people are not only living in fear, trying to fight the Philistines and living in fear of him, but also experiencing weakness. These are not good leadership qualities. For a good leader should never be satisfied with good enough. Good enough is not good enough. It's one of the things that I asked the Mexico team. We're getting ready to go to Mexico, getting our team together. But I asked them at the first training session, is good enough good enough? No, it's not good enough. And it's not, that's not good enough for me. It's, no, that's not good enough for the people that we're serving. And it's not good enough for our team. Let's give the very best that we can. This leader here, he's fine with sacrificing other people. It's good enough. They don't have to eat. They can eat later. It's good enough as long as he accomplishes what he wants to accomplish. And thus, his people are experiencing weakness. But verse 30, Jonathan asks a wonderful question. For now, would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? The victory could have been that much better had the people just been allowed to eat something, some sustenance, get some strength into them. The victory could have been even better. We could have done even greater. Now we move on to verses 31 and 32, where we see things getting worse. Saul's foolish decision to force his people into an allegiance to him is getting worse and worse step by step. And here we take another step downward, and he literally is leading his people into sin. Look what happens. Now they had driven back the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon. So the people were very faint, and the people rushed on the spoil and took sheep, oxen, and calves and slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. Now, some of you, within the next hour here, as soon as we get out of here, you're going to be sitting in some sushi restaurant. I like sushi. And I can eat, the cooked stuff or the raw stuff, whatever. I like them both. It just depends. But I like sushi. This is an extreme version of sushi here. No fish, obviously, no seafood. But notice what the people did in verse 32. They rushed on the spoil. What's the spoil? That's the sheep, the oxen, the calves. Now, what they did was, it says that they slaughtered them on the ground. So you'll note, they kill these animals on the ground. They're acting like animals themselves. And the people ate them with the blood. Now, this is problematic. This is deeply problematic for a couple of reasons. Obviously, there's the obvious. This is super gross. You ought not be, eating blood, cutting open an animal and just eating the raw meat. Obviously, that could be extremely dangerous. People, you get sick and die from that. But even more so than that, this is a breaking of God's law. So Saul is quite literally leading his people into disobedience or sin against God. By having them, we've getting them to a point that they're so hungry that they're willing to kill and eat raw animals, blood and all. So he has just, because of his foolish decision to force them into an allegiance, has them operating in fear, in weakness, and has just led them into sin. This is horrible leadership. A leader ought always to be leading his or her people, his or her followers, to higher ground. Psalm 23 is a wonderful example. The Lord is my shepherd, therefore I shall not be in want. We start out at the low levels, right? He leads me beside the still waters. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. It's a picture of being in the valley. You're there where the rivers are at. Where does it end? Through the valley of the shadow of death. Eventually, what is the shepherd doing? He's preparing a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He has successfully led his sheep up to the higher ground. That's what a leader ought always to be doing. Leading his or her people higher and higher to better places. Saul is doing the reverse. He's leading his people lower and lower. And here he has led them to a place where they are acting like animals themselves and even sinning against God. Now, what happens at this point? What happens at this point is monumental. This is decisive here. What happens? Now, the truth is, the fact is that all of us are going to fail at things. And we may find ourselves in a leadership position and find that we fail at it. We don't want to fail, but there's just going to be times when we blow it as a leader. But how we respond to that, how we react to that, what do we do after we have failed? Well, we'll see that later on in David's life, but for now we're looking and examining Saul's life. And here's what happens. And beginning at verse 33 and on down through 44, there is blame shifting. In other words, the blame gets shifted. Let's look at it. Verse 33. Then they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. Note his response. So he said, you have dealt treacherously. What did he just do? He just blamed everyone else. He just blamed everyone else. He said, you've dealt treacherously. He's talking to the people and saying, by sinning against God, you've dealt treacherously. Now, again, we might say, well, these are adults and they could have just waited and, waited and they didn't have to eat raw animals. The point is that they had gotten to the point of fear and exhaustion. They saw these animals because they were so hungry that they cut them open and ate them. Now, none of us, it's funny, the phrases that we use. Mom, I'm starving to death. Dad, can we please stop and eat something? I'm going to faint. You might find yourself on a road trip, going through, Arizona or Central California or something, Oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. I could eat that cow right now. I could eat a horse. All of these expressions we use. And then our parents remind us, really? You just ate like an hour and a half ago. I don't understand. What do you mean by starving? That's something that I would say as a dad. Really? Oh, you're starving, really? Oh, okay. Well, how about we do this? How about we find out what starving really is like, and then you can compare the two, and then you can come back and tell me if we're really starving or not. Okay, never mind. No, I'll just wait. Okay. It's funny the things we say, the thoughts that we have. This is not starving to death. They're not dying. But they may shortly after this if they do not eat, and they break down and they eat this raw meat, these raw animals and blood, and they're so hungry that they're willing to sin against God. Every one of them knows the law of God. But this is hunger. It's not just, some of us may have gone, a half a day without eating, super hungry. You may have even, maybe some of you, you may be extreme, man. You may have even gone a whole day without eating. But I'd be willing to bet that the majority of us have not. And if you have, you probably did it by choice. Like, oh man, I really need to, it's hot girl summer's coming up and I really need to slim it down. So I'm just not going to eat. And you might last a whole day and then after that, forget it. It's like, you know what? Maybe next summer, I tried. These guys are being forced into not eating, and so they get so desperate that they're willing to sin against God and put food in their bellies. And the leader's response is, at the end of verse 33, you have dealt treacherously. What did he just do? He just put the blame on them. Now again, we could say, well, they had the choice. Okay, yeah, they did. But you and I, we don't understand. We've never experienced hunger like this. We may say we have, but we haven't. And these guys have been fighting all day, living in fear of their leader. And what does the leader do? Stabs him in the back. You have dealt treacherously. It's your fault. And then what he does is, trying to fix it, he says, roll a large stone to me this day. Bring over a big stone. Then Saul said in verse 34, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, bring me here every man's ox and every man's sheep. Slaughter them here and eat. Do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. This was the first altar that he built to the Lord. So what it's telling us there is he didn't just bring a stone over and say, okay, kill it here and let's eat it raw. The point is he made an altar using that stone. They brought the animals over. They slaughtered them there the right way. Today we call it kosher. The animal's got to be killed a specific way. The blood's got to be drained a specific way. You got to get the blood out. There were laws against all of these things. So Saul is trying to fix it and saying, bring it over here. We'll cook it together and everybody can eat. So that's what he does. But in the process, he blames the people for the decision that he made, that he led them into. Now, beginning at verse 36, he blames someone else. Now Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder or attack them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, notice what they say. Here's what the people say. Do whatever seems good to you. Even after that fiasco, still the people are saying, do whatever seems good to you. In other words, we're with you. Then the priest said, and I love this, let us draw near to God here. Now, I do not know exactly what's going on in the priest's mind because we don't have the record of it. My assumption is that the priest has kind of watched what was going on. And the priest was probably thinking, man, this is not good. And he says, hey, Saul, you think we can, let's just stop for 5 minutes and let's pray. Let's just seek the Lord for a few minutes, like before we go on. Let us draw near to God here. And all of a sudden in Saul's mind, verse 37, oh, that's a great idea. So Saul asked counsel of God. And here's what he asks. He asks two good questions. He's asking God, shall I go down after the Philistines? And will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? Now, these are two great questions. These are essentially what Jonathan was asking when he got his assistant and went over to go look at the Philistines to show himself like, hey, Philistines, here I am. This is essentially what he was trying to find out. Jonathan was trying to find out, should I go to the Philistines? Should I go attack? And will you deliver them to us today? Now, these are great questions. And we can say, okay, Saul, good job for asking those questions. But in reality, Saul is asking a little too late. He should have asked that at the very beginning. It shouldn't have been his son asking those questions. He's the leader. He should have been asking God these questions from the beginning. Now, he asks these questions, but here's the problem in verse 39. Look at God's response. Verse 37. But he did not answer him that day. God didn't. God's response? Silence. Now, what does that mean? Oh my gosh. What does it mean God didn't answer? Now, it means a couple of different things, or it could mean a couple of different things, maybe more. But the couple of things that I think about is this. Maybe God is upset with Saul for what he's done, leading the people into sin. So maybe God is saying, I'm not answering you right now. You ever needed to talk to someone, but you knew that if you opened your mouth, you were going to go off. And so you go, not right now. I'm not answering. If you got a sibling, you've experienced that before, right? Especially if mom and dad are there. You're like, I'm not saying nothing. I will beat you later, but for now, nothing, right? If I say so, if I open my mouth, it's all going to come pouring out. I'm not saying God was doing that, but that's how I picture it. I picture God just going, You don't want to hear from me right now. But we don't know exactly. But the other thing is this. Here's the other possibility, at least the two possibilities that I see. The other possibility is that God didn't want them to go after the Philistines at that moment. And maybe God's just not answering so that Saul can just wait on the Lord. Just wait. You know, there are some scenarios for you and I where we're praying for something. If God's not answering, that's okay. I'll just wait. I'll just wait. Now, there are also, I will admit, times when I need an answer from God, like right now, someone is standing in front of me and going, hey, you going to go or not? And I'm going, Lord, 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 give me wisdom. And normally I'll just tell you what I would normally do in that moment. If I'm not hearing from the Lord, I would normally just say, nope, not going to do it. What, are you serious? Yeah, no, that's okay. It's not that big a deal. I don't hear the Lord telling me to go, so I don't feel like it's something I need to do. No. There are times when it's like, you know what? I'm making the decision based on wisdom that God has given me, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to go forward. Lord, help me. Saul is not satisfied with God's non-answer. And so what does he do in verse 37? Rather, verse 38. And Saul said, come over here, all you chiefs, all you leaders of the people, and know and see what this sin was today. Saul's not satisfied. He wasn't thinking about, remember the sacrifice earlier when he said, bring the rock over here and kill the animals over here. He's just, there's a problem, let me fix it. Here it is again, God's not answering. Well, we're going to figure out what the problem is. You must understand something here, and that is that Saul, why is he in this position, leading his people this way? At this point, blame shifting, blaming everybody else. That is because Saul has become poisoned with his own pride because of the position that he holds and the prominence and the power that goes along with that. He's infected with it. He cannot see even the possibility of these things being his fault. Listen, if you as a leader, if I as a leader, if I'm leading people, now listen to this, this is not hard to figure out. If I am leading people and the people that I'm leading end up in the wrong place, let me say it one more time because I'm going to ask you a question. Real simple. If I am leading people and the people that I am leading end up in the wrong place, whose fault is that? Thank you very much. It's the leader's fault, right? It's my fault. Saul has led his people into sin, but there's no thought, not even an inkling, no thought that he could possibly be the problem. It never crosses his mind. It never crosses his mind. There's no examining of his own heart. There's a problem, it's immediately someone else's fault. This is horrible leadership. Horrible leadership. I've talked about this briefly. I think it was in Sunday mornings. Maybe it was Wednesday nights. I can't remember right now, but I'll tell you again anyways, because I see this happen often. And that is that as a leader, it is my responsibility. One of my responsibilities is to take the blame when someone that I am leading does something wrong, when they make a mistake. And it's my fault. I take the blame. I say, you know what? It's my, and I've had to do that. I've had things happen in ministry and at times, and parents call up and they're angry or they want to meet with me, and you know what, your leader, he or she, they did this and they did that, or they said these things. It's my job to take the blame and to say, you know what, please forgive me. It's my fault. I didn't talk to them about this beforehand. They didn't know. I didn't train them properly. We haven't covered this yet. Please forgive me. I messed up. The last thing I'm going to do is to say, you know what, you're right. That leader's really dumb. And you know what, we should just get him out. Let's kick him out. In fact, let's just kick out their whole family from revival. They shouldn't even be here. I can't do that. If somebody that's following me ends up in the wrong place, the fault is not theirs. It's mine. I was the one leading them. Now, can people make their own choice and do their own dumb things, their own dumb decisions? Sure. We're not talking about that. We're talking about when I have led them and they've ended up in the wrong place, it's my fault. It's not someone else's fault. If you are a leader and if you are a team captain and your team loses, I get it. It's the entire team's fault. But you as a leader, you step up and you say, you know what? That was my fault. I need to be a better leader. We'll work harder. We're gonna do better. I don't go, you know what? You over there in right field, you're a real jerk. You know, why do you run like that, anyways? You know, just I don't even want you on the team. It's your fault that we lost. We don't do that. No, as a leader, it's me. He's busy. Saul is busy blaming everyone else. And you go, you know what? It can't get any worse than that. Bet it can. So Saul said in verse 36, we're going to go down. Let's go see what happens. Verse 37, he asks some good questions, but God didn't answer. So in verse 38, he calls all the leaders together. He says, you know what? We're going to find out whose sin this was. Notice that? He's looking for the sin. He doesn't have to look for it. It's him. But he's looking for it elsewhere. We're going to find it. This is what you call a sin sniffer. We're going to sniff it out. We're going to find out whose fault this was. So in verse 39, he says, for as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, really, though it be in Jonathan, my son, he shall surely die. But not a man among all the people answered him. Everyone stayed silent. No one said anything. They didn't say, dude, it's your fault. They just said, silence. Wrong decision on their part. Someone should have said something. But what he's saying in verse 39, when he says, even if it's my son Jonathan, he's going to die. He has no idea that his son ate honey. He's about to find out. So what is he talking about? What he's doing is using this dramatic effect. Like, you know what? Somebody's in trouble here. Somebody sinned. God's not answering us. And we're going to find out who it was. And even if it's my own son, I'm going to kill him. He doesn't understand that it actually was his son that ate the honey. He's about to find out. Let's find out what happens. And so, it says in verse 40, then he said to all Israel, you be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. In other words, okay, you go for it. What is he doing? Separating. See, he's, in Saul's mind, it's the people. It's not him, it's not his son, because his son would never do that. So it's somebody else's fault. We're going to find out who it is. And what they do is, in verse 41, it says, therefore Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. So Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. Okay, let me explain to you what's going on. No one is really quite sure what lots were. They would cast lots to make decisions. And what it seems to us from the accounts that we have in the Bible is that they had some sort of items that they would cast or throw, and they would trust God for the answer. I don't know what it was. For us, it might be something to the equivalent of flipping a coin. And so maybe there's a problem between Santi and I. And we go, God, we want you to decide. And God, if it's me, I pray that it would be tails. But if it's Santi, pray that it would be heads. Because he's going to lose his head if it is. And then we would trust God and say, God, you cause it to land on whatever. And we would flip the coin, whichever side it landed on. We go, oh, that's the guilty party. So we don't know exactly. That's just my weak explanation or a possibility of what it was. It was something like that, where they're trusting God. They would cast these lots, and then God would give the answer through that, it would seem. So what happens? So it says in verse 41, there's two groups of people. There's all the people, and then there's Saul and Jonathan. And what happens in verse 41 is that they cast the lot, and look at this. Saul and Jonathan were taken or chosen, but the people escaped. All of a sudden, he casts the lot, and the lot lands on him and his son. And Saul said, in verse 42, this is crazy. This is madness. Cast lots between my son Jonathan and me. So Jonathan was taken. What's madness about that? Never once did Saul say, hold it. It's not the people. It's either me or you, Jonathan. One of us blew it. Never once did he go, wait a minute, maybe this is me. He could not see the possibility that all of this would be caused by him. One foolish, selfish decision, the forced allegiance, has led to fear and weakness and sin and blame shifting. He blames the people, then he blames his own son, and you go, it couldn't get any worse. Fasten your seatbelts. Verse 43, then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him and said, I only tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand. So now I must die. Saul answered, God do so, and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. You go, wait, what's happening? Saul is so infected by his own pride and his own sin that he, in this moment, is about to kill his own son. For what? For eating honey. I told people not to eat until I had accomplished what I wanted to do. This is a full-grown adult, or at least a full-grown body. This is a little baby throwing a fit. I didn't get my way, so now I'm going to get rid of you. Now here's what happens as a result of this. Verse 45, but the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked this with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. What just happened right there in verse 45? Saul just lost the confidence of the people. When they said to him right in the middle of verse 45, certainly not, what they're saying is, no, king. Now that doesn't even make sense. A king is telling you to do something. The only answer is, yes, king. You don't say no to the king. What has just happened is he's lost the heart of the people. And once the leader has lost the heart of the people, forget it. Cannot lead them anywhere. Cannot lead them to success. The people rescued Jonathan. He did not die. Then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. Craziness. Never once there. Let me read the end verses. I don't have any more subpoints. Let me just read verses 47 and 52 because it names some people. It tells us a little bit more about Saul. Sums up some things for us. So Saul established his sovereignty over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side. Against Moab, against the people of Ammon, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them. And he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. The sons of Saul were Jonathan, Jishui, and Malchishua. And the names of his two daughters were these: the name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal, who will end up becoming the wife to Saul's successor, a young man named David. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, who was Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. Now there was fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul, and when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself. In other words, to be part of his army. There is never a thought in this entire section in Saul's mind that he could be the problem. Never. And yet, all of this was his fault. It was all a result of his forced allegiance. I'm going to force you to follow me, force you to do what I want you to do. And then what resulted after that was chaos. What is the difference between Saul and his successor David? Did David ever sin? Yeah, everybody knows that. If I were to ask, well, what do you know about David? There's two things. What's the first one? Goliath. David and Goliath. The second one, Bathsheba. Those are the two big ones. Those are the ones that we know about. Now, there are lots of other things, and as we go through the account, continue on into the life of David, there's so many other things. But those are the two big things. What do we know? One of his greatest victories and one of his greatest failures. And his failure with Bathsheba was monumental. He paid for that with his own son, the life of his own son. What's the difference? Why was David a man after God's own heart? And why was Saul rejected? They both sinned. What was the difference? The difference was that David repented, asked for forgiveness, knew that he was sinful. He repented. Saul never once here took any blame for what had taken place. David, by contrast, said in Psalm 51, "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions," he said. "Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions. My sin is ever before you. Against you and you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight, that you may be found blameless when you speak, or blameless when you judge." He goes on to say, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity. In sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden parts you will make me to know wisdom. Purge me with hyssop," he said, "and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow." It was a psalm, Psalm 51, a psalm of repentance. And there were lots of others. Psalm 51 just happens to be my favorite. But he repented. He knew when things were his fault. Sometimes he tried to deny them or hide from them. But once he was found out, "It's my fault. Please forgive me." And that's the big difference. Listen, what's the difference between Saul and David and you or me? We're all people. Saul and David, you go, well, they're in the Bible. Yeah, but they're still people. People used by God in some mighty ways. What's the difference? What we want to do is we understand, like Saul, like David, you and I, we sin. We struggle with sin at times. What we want to do is learn the negative lessons of Saul's life and say, you know what, I don't want this in my life. Fear and weakness and sin and blame shifting and loss of confidence. That's not good. I know that. So what's going to set me apart from Saul, what's going to set me apart from others, is the knowledge that I am a sinner, I've been saved by grace, and that I do make mistakes. And sometimes things are my fault. And that I need to go to God for that forgiveness and for mercy. That's what David did, very simply. He understood that at times he was the problem. He was to blame. And you and I want to be able to reflect on ourselves, to search our own hearts and say, God, there's a problem. Is it me? God, if I'm the problem, show me, reveal it to me. I want to be right with you. Because it's not until we recognize that there's a problem that we then can ask for forgiveness, right? If I don't have a problem, why would I ask for forgiveness? So what you and I want to do is be like David. And we'll see that throughout David's life as we get further on into Samuel. You'll want to make sure that you get signed up for our